everyone. I'm Marina Kadekel, the Chief Content Officer at Thrive Global. Today, we're going to be talking about one of the most important workplace issues of our current moment, and that's our relationships at work, and why they're so important to our lives and to our organizations. We're going to close with some practical and actionable tips at Thrive. We call them Microsteps, for how you can nurture and deepen your relationships at work, whatever your work situation looks like and wherever you're working from right now. According to a study at Harvard that's been going on continuously since 1938, the single biggest factor in our happiness isn't money or fame or any other conventional metrics of success. It's our relationships. It's what makes us happy and fulfilled. And given that we spend up to half of our waking hours working, the quality of our workplace relationships is critical. And yet, they've never been more challenging than right now. We know the future of our workplace is going to be hybrid. So how do we nurture our relationships at work so we can thrive in this new hybrid future? To talk about that, I'm thrilled to be joined by two leading experts on workplace well-being. Jen Fisher is the Chief Wellbeing Officer for Deloitte and Thrive Global's Editor-at-Large for Work-Life Integration. She is also the co-author, along with Ann Phillips, of the best-selling book, Work Better Together, How to Cultivate Strong Relationships and Maximize Well-Being and Boost Bottom Lines. And Joey Hubbard is Thrive Global's Chief Training Officer, and he has been helping companies and executives improve well-being and productivity for over 30 years. Jen, I'll start with you. Why are our relationships, and particularly our work relationships, so important?
Most of us as working adults, fortunately or unfortunately, spend half of our waking hours or more in a week at work, whether that is virtual work, in-person work, or somewhere in between. The people that we are spending most of our time with during a day are the people that we work with. And certainly the virtual world creates its own challenges when it comes to creating, sustaining, and maintaining relationships. And I know we will dive into that. But if you reflect on that Harvard study that says the most important thing to our long-term health and happiness, our longevity, is the strength of our relationships. And so if you translate that into the working world and how we're spending our hours during any given day, our workplace relationships are critically important. They are, so much tied to, how we feel when we get out of bed in the morning and log onto our laptop or get into our car to drive to the workplace, right? How engaged we feel, how connected we feel to the organization, what our sense of belonging feels like. And all of those things, through so much research, translates into the quality of work that we do and our loyalty to an organization and our productivity. When you think about or talk about workplace well-being, oftentimes I feel like relationships are left out of the equation. I think that we have all certainly felt the lack of connection over the past 18, 19, 20 months. I can't even keep up how long it's been. And so I think it really has highlighted the impact of relationships to our well-being overall and in the workplace.
Joey, I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about the connection between the quality of our relationships and the quality of our work.
Absolutely. We've seen studies now that are proving the connection. We've seen studies that have shown that when an employee is satisfied with work, they'll deliver at about 100% of their capacity. When they're dissatisfied, they'll deliver at 71% of their capacity. If they're engaged, it goes up to 144% of their capacity. And if they're inspired, 225% of their capacity.
Wow.
So you ask the question, well, what drives engaged and inspired employees? Well, at the key is if an employee feels seen, heard, valued, connected, if they feel like they belong. And producing a culture of empathy has been shown to be the most important element for not only work performance, but improving work performance. So connection becomes critical in all of that, because how we treat each other, the relationships we have, if people know that we care about them as employees and as employers, if they know that they value, that they're valued, that they matter, all of that drives improved work performance. But not only that, we also know that it improves their overall well-being. And given that they're at work, as Jen said, most of their time, being able to go home feeling good about yourself and your connections and your relationships boosts home. And when home's good, work is good. When work is good, home is good.
So, Jen, why should companies and managers and CEOs care? I know you have some feelings about the business case for strong work relationships. Tell us a little bit about that.
If you employ human beings, you have to care about these things. I mean, that's what it means to be human, and that's what it means to have a human-centered workplace, right? And so it's not just a buzzword. And I think, we probably can't have this conversation without talking about the Great Resignation, but that's what the workforce is telling us, right? They want to work for organizations that care about who they are as people, as human beings, right? And so as a C-suite executive, as a leader, as a manager of people, I think that the core leadership skills are changing, right? They aren't the metric focused leadership skills of the past anymore, and they're not somewhere out in the distant. They're right now, and it's interesting that they're the things that many of us were taught were soft skills. And I don't like the terminology soft skills. I call them essential human skills because they are what make us uniquely human. And we can't, we need to move away from where we are right now, which is fearing the technology and trying to compete with the technology. That technology can work 24 hours a day, human beings can't, and we shouldn't try to, and we shouldn't want to, and employers shouldn't want us to, because we can get into all of the reasons why a sleep deprived workforce is a problem. But we should be using the technology that we have to augment who we are as humans. And those human leadership skills are empathy, compassion, authenticity, complex problem solving, human connection, relationships. Those are things that human beings innately do. It's who we are, and we should be celebrating that in the workplace. And we've gotten to kind of a point in the workplace where we stopped celebrating that, and we've created fear around, is technology going to take my job, and what does that mean for me? And I think we need to flip that dialogue and say, yeah, technology might take away some of the things that you're doing, but do you really want to be doing the things that technology can do for you, and you can actually spend more of your time being a human being and connecting with others and making it a real human workplace? But I think it's going to look different for every organization. And even within an organization, what we know at Deloitte is that it's not only going to look different inside of Deloitte that it's going to look like in other organizations, but it's going to even look different for teams, right? And empowering our teams, giving our teams the autonomy to make those decisions for themselves. Actually, you get even more of a boost. I get to decide when, where, and how I work along with my team members, how we support each other, how we connect with each other. So I don't think we know the answer. I think that it's exciting, but I also think we're going to screw some things up along the way.
So, Joey, earlier Jen mentioned the Great Resignation, and we're seeing so many people want the added flexibility of remote work. But how should people be thinking about their work relationships, knowing that we're going to be in this hybrid or constantly changing workplace? Like, what mindset shifts would be helpful, and how should we think about it?
We're seeing part of the Great Resignation is the fact that we're working remotely. See, partly what is happening in brains, when we're together, to Jen's point, we're in an office, we're hanging out, we're celebrating, we're engaging, we're, iterating. What happens in our brain is those conversations, those interactions will boost oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, endorphins. And that boost, that charge can affect our brain for 30 minutes to an hour. And if they're big enough, maybe even 4 hours, where our brain is getting this recharge from those interactions and those connections. That's been pulled out in this new workplace, especially over the last 18, 19 months. And consequently, some of the reason why people are leaving is because they don't have connection. And in their brain, they're feeling disconnected, not recognizing that looking at, their work through a screen all day isn't working for their brain. And so they're mistranslating that into, oh, I need to leave my job because I'm not connected anymore. When in reality, it's not the job, it's the way they're working. So for some people, learning through connection, we call them kinesthetic learners, being around people is critical. So as you think about the next phase, you have to recognize that for some of you, if you're a visual learner, you're an auditory learner, this hasn't been as difficult as it's been for those people who are kinesthetic learners. And so part of the Great Resignation is just people not recognizing that lack of connection has severely impacted them. The other part is that people are starting to figure out, I kind of like working from Montana, and my job's not going to let me do it, so I got to find another job, and that's okay as well. But in reality, most companies have figured out that we're going to be in this new workplace, and we have an opportunity, maybe a once in a generation opportunity, to redefine work. And so the mindset shift has to be, I have to understand what's going to work best for me. We saw a study that said 66% of people are concerned about their health and safety in returning back into the office. So that's a very real thing. Now, who knows where this pandemic is going to go, but it is important to note what you're worried about and pay attention to it and write it down. When you write it down, you drop the severity of the stress inside of you, and you can actually think about it and focus on it and create a plan. So build some boundaries for yourself, understand what your worries and concerns are, address those, and then have conversations. Sit down with your manager, with your team, and say, hey, here's what I'm feeling. What are you feeling? And make sure you source all that out, because without those conversations, if people are going into fear and they don't feel like they're able to talk about it, or it's not being addressed, that may be another reason why they decide, oh, I need to leave. So it's important to really think through all of that, have conversations about it, and just recognize how you operate best. You may need 3 days in the office just to sustain how you work best. So make sure you think about it and you're clear about what your needs are.
I want to shift to talking about burnout. It's something we talk a lot about at Thrive Global. And I know, Jen, you talk about it a lot in your work too. So we know that burnout was a problem even before the pandemic. And for many people, it's gotten worse. So what is the connection between burnout and relationships, Jen? And it goes both ways, doesn't it? Are relationships actually potentially an antidote to burnout?
Yeah, absolutely. I think relationships are strong, good relationships, positive relationships are certainly an antidote to burnout. Probably not so much negative relationships, but positive relationships are one of the top antidotes to burnout. For so many of the things that we have already been talking about. When you feel seen, when you feel heard, when you feel like you belong, when you feel like you're not alone, right? I mean, in my own experience of burnout, I experienced burnout 7 years ago before we were even talking about burnout. I didn't know what I was going through. I had no idea because it wasn't as commonly spoken about as it is today, which is a great thing that we're talking about it so broadly and so widely in the workplace. It's also probably not such a great thing that we're talking about it so broadly and so widely in the workplace because far too many people are experiencing it. But I had no idea what I was even going through, and I didn't speak up. I didn't ask for help because I looked around, and we as human beings, and especially people that are high performers, we just continue to power through. Like, I'm going to sleep on the weekend, or I'll take a vacation when, and you just kind of keep kicking the can down the road until your body and your brain's like, all right, you're not going to do anything about it, so so I got your back. Literally, I'm going to put you on your back. And that's what happened to me. And so people ask me, if what was the number one thing you do differently? And I think what I would do differently is ask for help when I started to realize that that I couldn't handle it, that something was wrong, that the workload was too much, because the end result of burnout for an individual is terrible, and the end result of having a burnt out workforce, or even a handful of workers that are burnt out, that either leave or aren't productive, or don't aren't great for the culture and the environment because of the way that they're showing up. Not that they have bad intentions, but we all know what it is probably like to work with somebody that is struggling with burnout, right? And it's you want to help them, but you don't know how, and you can't. Right? And so it doesn't create a great workplace culture. And so burnout all around is bad for the individual, it's bad for the organization. But working in an organization that has psychological safety, where you feel seen, where you feel heard, where you have strong relationships, and you don't feel like you're alone, and you can pick up that phone or send a note to somebody, a text to somebody, and say, hey, can I talk? Or hey, this is what I'm feeling, or I think I might need to take a little bit of time off or step back, or my workload, can you help me prioritize my workload? Things like that. I mean, those are things that I didn't do that I wish I had done. And that comes much easier when you have relationships in the workplace, because it's much more comfortable to have a conversation with somebody that's your friend, that you feel connected to, especially when you might be struggling.
You write in your book that with technology, we're more connected than ever, but at the same time, we're also lonelier than ever. And in fact, rates of loneliness have doubled since the 1980s. What is the role of technology in making our work relationships harder to maintain?
We are even more connected than we ever have been before because of our technology, but we're lonelier, right? I mean, that that kind of like, you kind of are like, well, that makes no sense, but it actually does, because that is the only proof point that you need to tell you that you need real human connection. That connection constantly through a screen is not real. I mean, it's not fake human connection, but it can't replace those moments that matter, right? We still need those face to face, in person times where we're connected, where we are truly looking another person in the eye. And probably many people have read the research around the delays that happen in technology when you're looking at a screen, and you can't, you can, but you can't really gauge emotions or facial reactions. A lot of that, there's a lot of difficulty in doing that. And so I think what that stat or what that information tells us is that, again, technology can be used to augment, to sustain human relationships, but it can never be used to replace human relationships. And so I think that and that's, I'm not a technology hater. As a matter of fact, I have probably every piece of technology, every wearable, I'm I'm the exact opposite of a Luddite. I'm one of those that is over connected. But my hope is that, when as the world continues to open up and we all start to feel a little bit more comfortable going out and going to restaurants, that that experience that we all had in a restaurant, where you looked around and there's four people at a table and all four of them are on their electronic device. My hope for the future world is that you go to a restaurant and there's not an electronic device to be found, because we are using those devices the way that they're meant to be used. We are using them to augment who we are as humans, as opposed to replace those human connections. And so I don't know that there's kind of much more that I can say about that, because that stat to me is so staggering, right? Like, we're more connected now than ever, but we're more lonely than ever. And the only reason is because we believe that scrolling through social media is connecting with other human beings, and it's not. And so we need to get away from that stat.
Jen, I think I read Jennifer Aniston said if Friends, the show Friends, were filmed today, it would just be a bunch of people in a coffee shop looking at their phones.
Absolutely.
Would
And that would
not
be really boring to watch. None of us would want to watch that show.
I love that. Joey, when we talk about our work relationships, we don't always think about our relationship with technology, but in a way, it's one of our most important work relationships that we have. Talk a little bit about how we should be thinking about our relationship with technology as it relates to the other relationships in our lives and in our work.
Technology has a use, right? It's allowed us to be able to get work done in the last 18 months, where imagine how the world would have shut down without it, right? So it absolutely has value. But again, creating boundaries around every relationship in your life is important, right? And the one with technology may be the most important one to create a boundary around. There's lots of reasons for it. And, there's lots of studies being done around the negative impact of technology. And some of you seen some of the documentaries that are out about that, or you have more recently heard more about what's going on with Facebook and Instagram and all those things that are going on around technology and the negative impact. What we know is that your brain needs recharge time. The most important thing you have to make sure you're doing every day is recover. And recovery involves things like sleep and movement and nutrition. And the fifth element beyond that is downtime, right? We know hard work is all part of a productivity base. So that's the given. But sleep, movement, nutrition, and downtime are the four other elements to what I call the big five around productivity. And downtime is the one thing that we often sort of pass by, but it is the time when we set aside all technology, where we can hang out and be with the people we love and care about, where the reason why we work is to be able to contribute in our lives to the lives of the people that we love and care for. But if we forget to take time to be with those people because we're so connected to technology, then we're missing the point of our lives, right? No one's going to get to the end of their life and say, if I could have answered more email or been on Instagram more, I'd be more fulfilled in this moment, right? You get to the end of your life and you think about, did I love enough? Did I care enough? Did I give enough? Did I share enough? And none of that necessarily happens through technology. That happens through personal relationship, downtime with the people that you love and care about, as I said, joy, pleasure, fun. Those things are critical.
Jen, how have, in terms of work relationships, I'd be really curious to hear how work relationships have played out in your own life and your career. And what are some of the lessons you've learned from your work relationships?
I've been at Deloitte for 20 years, and when some people hear that, they're like, "Wow, 20 years, that's a really long time," which yes, it is. And then the question that follows is, why did you stay? Like, what made you stay? And there's a lot, but the number one reason is the people and my relationships with people. I wouldn't be where I am. None of us would be where we are without other people, and the care and feeding that we all received from other people to get where we are, and to get where we're going. But I also think in terms of lessons learned, and I talk about this in the book Work Better Together, the big aha for me was, shortly a year or so after I first became a people manager. So I had people working for me for the first time. And I was so excited, but I was a taskmaster. I was celebrated and rewarded for I was known for being able to get stuff done. Like, oh, go to Jen. She can figure out how to get anything done. And I just thought that that was the greatest thing. And so that was my mindset. I was a taskmaster. Work was for work. I came to work and I was going to get work done. And anybody that worked with me or for me, they were here to work. And I didn't invest in people and the relationships with the people that worked for me. And so one day I had a woman come and sit in front of me and say, hey, there's so many great things that I admire about you as a leader, but, and there's the big but I've accepted another role in another part of the organization. And, in that moment, and we kind of went on, I asked her why, and, she gave me some different answers. But I think in that moment, which is a very human thing to do, I instead of listening to her and trying to learn from that, I became defensive. I was like, okay, well, this role is just too fast paced. It's not the right time for her. It's not the right time in her life. It's just not what she's looking for. All of those reasons. And I made it about her. And then, after I experienced my own burnout and had to kind of come back from that and figure out the role that I wanted work to play in my life, the conversation that I had with her just kept coming back up for me and coming back up for me. And I was like, okay, I'm supposed to learn something from this. And my big takeaway was, it wasn't her. And there was nothing wrong with the job we were doing. What was wrong was the way that I was managing people. I never actually asked her, like, what is it that strengthens you? What do you like about the job? What do you hate about the job? What do you want to do more of? What do you want to do less of? What is your family like? Your home life like? What do you need? And what do what's the time commitment? Those types of things, those types of questions that we've all been talking about. I never had any of those conversations. And I realized, like, in that moment, like, wow, I wouldn't have wanted to work for me either. Because yeah, maybe we got a lot of things done, but like that doesn't sound that exciting. I wouldn't want to stay in that role for very long either. And so when I had that realization, I sent her a message and I said, "Hey, do you have a few minutes to talk?" And I told her, I said, "Look, it might have taken me like 18 months because I'm a slow learner." But I finally realized what you were saying to me that day when you left our team to move on to a different team. And and you've changed me, and thank you, because now I will be a much different person and a much different leader and a much different colleague because of that experience. And so for me, there's nothing, there's no other story that kind of represents to me and the leader that I want to be, and kind of what I learned from that moment in time. And also, quite frankly, her bravery for coming to me and telling me, like, this isn't that the kind of work environment that I want to be in. There's a lot of things I respect about you, but I can't work for you. And so I write kind of in more detail in the book about that, but that's kind of one of my biggest significant lessons learned.
I love that story, Jen, and I love the honesty. Thank you so much for sharing that. Joey, how about you? What lessons have you learned in terms of relationships at work that have stuck with you?
Well, I think some of my best friends have happened through work, but I'll tell you, while I consider myself a compassionate leader, I had a moment when we started Thrive where I had a young woman who was working for me who was really bright and really smart. And I told her, hey, you've got a promotion, you've got a raise, you've done a great job. Here are the 4 or 5 things I need you to improve. And I go into the conference room and I'm sitting in there and we're all talking. And then my assistant comes in and goes, hey, can I talk to you? I said, sure. And I hop out. She goes, this young woman's in the bathroom crying.
Mm.
And I said, what happened? And she said, you happened. And I said, what did I do? And she said, I don't know. After you talked to her. And so I go and I ask her to come out and I'm talking to her. And I realized that she only heard the 4 or 5 things that she had to improve.
Mm.
And it really started me on this journey of building this whole compassionate directness model that is a core principle of Thrive, because I realized I had not built the relationship with her where she knew my feedback was all about her success. She saw it as an attack. Now, in my mind, that was all about her success, but I hadn't communicated that. I hadn't built the relationship that was necessary. And so I realized that it's a very important component to work relationships is to slow down. And I do it now. I ask people, what's your North Star? What do you want? To Jen's point, like, what's your family like? Or what do you do for joy? And really understand the person. And then I get this alignment with them around, okay, so I'm here to help you achieve your North Star. That's my job. And you tell me if I'm off course, you give me feedback. I'm off course on helping you get there or on course. And I'll give you feedback if you're off course on achieving your North Star or on course. And that's our relationship with each other. And then we can hang out and we can talk. We can talk about a lot of things about life. But that when we give each other feedback, it's all directed towards this. We're here to help each other achieve our goals. And so for me at work, I have to make sure that they know that I care, that I value them, that I'm here to help them achieve their goals. Then I find that everything else works out. But if I didn't take the time, which I didn't in that case, I can give the best feedback in the world and it doesn't land because all they're hearing is I'm course correct. I'm telling them they're wrong or they're off or any of that. So to me, work relationships are about really making sure people know you're in their corner and so that you got their back. Then everything else can build and grow from there.
I love that, Joey. And that reminds me of something else we do at Thrive, which I know you had a big part in, which is the entry interview, especially now when people are starting jobs remote or hybrid. You don't really get to see the person in person sometimes. So it's even more important, just like an exit interview, but more when someone starts within the first
Mhm.
couple weeks. Your manager sits down with you and asks what's important to you outside of work, like who are you, all those questions, what's non-negotiable for you if you have an appointment twice a week that they have to go to, or that workout class or something like that we wouldn't necessarily have known otherwise. But that reminded me of that, Joey, and that has been really helpful to me personally when onboarding new people.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So speaking of solutions, this is my favorite part, actually. I want to ask both of you, what small steps can people take right away if they're inspired by this conversation and they want to strengthen their work relationships? And at Thrive, we call these small steps Microsteps, and I edited an entire book of them called Your Time to Thrive. And in the book, we have a whole section devoted to Microsteps just for relationships and relationships at work. And so one of my favorite ones is, once a day, have a conversation where you mostly listen. And Jen, I've been there too, where I've been sort of, I think I know what the person's going to say or how this is going to be, but I don't really know. And so I feel like this step really helps me consciously like step back and let the person talk and really listen and really take in what they're saying. I also love the micro step of swapping how are you, which is a very common question when you just get on a Zoom with someone, for a deeper question. I love what's on your mind. Actually, Ariana, Thrive's founder and CEO, Ariana Huffington, she asks that in her one-on-ones, what's on your mind? And it's such a powerful question because it opens the door to the person to talk about whatever they need to talk about. So what about you guys, Jen, Joey? What are some of the small steps or micro steps that you think people can take right now to strengthen their relationships?
Yeah, so I love asking the deeper question. I always ask, how are you sleeping? Because people are like, wait, what? Why do you want to know how I'm sleeping? But, so first it kind of throws them off a little bit. And so they actually have to think about their answer. But then it often opens up a dialogue. And if it's with somebody that you speak with more often, they come ready to like tell you how they're sleeping because then they know, right? But the truth is, as you all know at Thrive, right? If I know how you're sleeping, I typically know how you're doing, so I don't even need to ask how you're doing after that. The other thing, things that I do, I love to read, so I love to share, what book I'm reading or something that I learned from a book that I'm reading or an article that I read. I don't typically share it through email. I try to share it through some other means like a collaboration platform to cut down on, some of the digital overwhelm that we're all feeling through email. But I think the biggest thing for me is being authentic, right? On days that I'm struggling, I let my team know that I'm just not showing up at my best, and so we should probably move this call because you're not going to get Jen at her best, right? And just doing that allows them to know that like, okay, she's human too, and she has bad days too, and therefore I'm allowed to have bad days, and I'm allowed to say, hey, I'm going to kind of take a breather for today or not join this call for today, but I'll catch up tomorrow type of thing. And that just opens up a world of safety when it comes to anything you really want to talk about in a relationship. And so I think everybody has a different comfort level with how much they're willing to share. And so I'm not advocating for oversharing because that creates all kinds of other issues. But to me it goes back to like just be human, like you don't have to have everything perfect. Part of being human is being imperfect, and we should celebrate that and support that in one another.
I love that, Jen. So I have a couple of little twists on both of you said. One is I do ask the question a lot. What are you doing to take care of yourself?
Mm.
It's just an interesting, you get a different set of responses based on sort of where people are in their life. But it is, to Jen's point, understanding that there's some foundational things occurring or not occurring that could call out that someone's challenged. And I'm a big fan of the listener. The thing that I found is to make sure you have an empathetic response. That often people will. I just tend to be in the role where people will come to me and talk a lot about what their challenges are. And I found if I don't have to have the answers, right? And one of the things I find a lot of leaders get pressured by is, oh my God, I have to have the great answer to their problems. But one of the things I'm finding is that I don't have to have an answer. My only answer has to be, okay, I'm with you now. How can I support you? And then let them tell me, like, because 9 times out of 10, they don't actually need anything from me. They just needed me to listen. But in the 1 out of 10 where they do need something, they know what they need and they'll tell me. So being really there for people right now has been probably the most important element to what I think is assisting our team through this time period, which is really challenging for everyone out there.
Oh my
I
gosh.
love that.
I love Joey. Jen, I love in your book, you write, becoming more human at work and nurturing the best in our relationships is the next great innovation. I love that. Um, how can companies and managers work to create a more, to your point, a more human work environment that fosters these better relationships?
Yeah, I mean, I think that so much of what we talked about, right, today is representative of what a human workplace looks like. But I think we all need to give ourselves permission to show up, show up as our human, show up as who we are, as imperfect or as perfect as that might be on any given day, and give permission to others to do the same. But I think the self permission piece, when it comes to leaders, right, in particular, because I think, leaders often believe that they have to be, uncrackable, right? That they have to show up and be strong and, put on the brave face. And all the research will actually say that the best leaders, the most inspiring leaders, actually do the very opposite of that. And so, that's what I would say. And that, look, I think that everybody's a leader. So when I say leader, yes, you could think about your C-suite executives, but we're all leaders of some sort in our organizations and our lives. And so I think it applies to all of us. And I think, once we do that, that's the best way to give permission to other people, right? Because you can say, I mean, I think the worst thing you can do is not role model it, right? Say it, but don't do it. And I talk about it in the book. I have stories of that where I said it and I didn't do it. And then my team called me out on it, which is great. So, like you, Marina, I have people in my life that regularly call me out when I'm not behaving in line with, my core values, which is great because look, none of us are perfect. But I think that that's just it, right? Like showing up and saying, hey, I'm not perfect. And I expect you to call me out when I'm not perfect, or when none of us are perfect and we're never going to be. So perfect is the wrong word, but you know what I'm saying. But I expect you to call me out when my behavior is out of alignment with what that I believe and what I stand for and what we've talked about as a team or an organization.
I love that, Jen. Thank you both so much. This was such a great conversation, a lot of food for thought. And even for me, we talked about a lot of things that make me want to think about how I am in my relationships at work, outside of work, and just reinforces how important those are, not just to our mental health and productivity, but also, to our work and to our performance at work. It's all very, very connected. So I want to thank you both for all of your wisdom. This was amazing. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.